Hi there, and welcome to the third annual Google Security Update, where I will attempt to answer the question, what has Google Security done for you lately? So as you will have figured out from the description, I'm Stefan Samoji. I work on Google's security and privacy engineering team. And I also have the good fortune of working with a bunch of startups at GV, which is Alphabet's early stage startup venture arm. I also advise Google Capital, which works with later stage companies on security and privacy stuff. But most importantly, the charter of Google's security and privacy engineering team is to protect our users and their data, which is a really simple statement to make, but it hides a lot of complexity underneath. So if we do our job right, this is what happens. Absolutely nothing. You get the blank slide. If we do our job correctly, the user doesn't notice, and this is the ideal that we strive for. For those of you who saw the keynote, you will have seen that Dave Burke mentioned security as a top theme for Android N. And further on in the keynote, Eric Kai made a point that security is absolutely critical to Allo and Duo both, even to the point of adding some very specific security features, including end-to-end encryption and other things, to incognito chats. So security is very pervasive throughout Google. It's not simply and only a function of the security and privacy engineering team. So the fact that you're here indicates that you also think security and privacy are important. But before I continue, I want to clear up a few things. I worked on some of the projects that I'm going to be talking about today, but certainly not all of them. There is only one of me. And I'm also just a representative for my hundreds of teammates all around the world who work on this stuff day in, day out. And this is a couple of hundred of them. So let's start by also setting the stage. Since I have a fairly limited amount of time, I'm only going to be providing a highlights reel of stuff that we've done over the past approximately year. If you want to check out some of the previous videos, they're up on YouTube from previous annual security updates. With that, let's talk about TLS. So protecting data in transit is really crucial between endpoint and backend. You get integrity guarantees for the data, that it was protected from adulteration. You get confidentiality because it's encrypted. You also get a certain amount of identity assurance because you know that you are talking to the server that you think you are talking to. One important meta thing that happened during the last year is that we used to be able to use SSL and TLS interchangeably, but no more. There is no such thing as a secure version of SSL anymore. So SSL bad, TLS good, TLS 1.2 best. TLS 1.3 is happening, but it's not there yet. So in terms of current best practices, TLS 1.2 is the way to go. So we've been busy on the TLS front. Last September, we announced the beginnings of the Blogger transition to HTTPS. We knew that we were a little bit late with this. Excuse me. But doing this right is actually fairly complicated. Blogger delivers a lot of user-generated content, which brings with it the risk of mixed content warnings in browsers. And so we wanted to be careful. We wanted to be very deliberate with this. So last September, we added a checkbox that anybody with a blog on Blogger could turn on this checkbox and start debugging whether or not they had any mixed content issues. Earlier this month, first week of May, we hit our next big milestone. All Blogspot blogs now have an HTTPS version by default. There's nothing that anybody has to do about this. And that's very much by design. It's like the blank slide. If we do our job right, nobody has to spend extra effort and nobody notices. We also added HTTPS redirect, so that if people come to your blog via HTTP, we will automatically redirect them to the HTTPS version if that's what you want. And since we know that mixed content can still be a problem, we've actually added some helpful mixed content warning tools to help you debug those within your own blog. Now, Chrome continues to be at the center of a lot of our TLS and certificate-related work. One of the things that we're doing right now, for example, is via opt-in collecting invalid certificate chains, because we're always interested in figuring out what it is out there in the wild that triggers HTTPS warnings. One thing that we discovered during previous research projects is that a very large proportion of TLS warnings are simply the result of misset local clocks. So dead motherboard batteries or other reasons why the local clock is not right. If it's too far in the past or too far in the future, that is technically a problem. It is technically an error. But is it really inhibiting or otherwise adversely affecting the user's security at that moment? Not so much. And we also know from our user experience research that users get security warning fatigue. So we think very carefully about whether or not we should be presenting a warning, whether there really is something for the user to do. In this case, it's relatively mundane. Set your clock and you'll be fine. But in general, we're always looking for ways of minimizing the warnings that we're going to show. Looking into the near future, we're going to be updating some of Chrome's connection security warnings in M52. Right now, it's still in dev, but the code has landed, so if you want to take a look, you can take a look in dev, and it'll be in stable as soon as M52 goes stable. For those of you who didn't have the opportunity to see Emily Stark from the Chrome security team give her talk on HTTPS myth-busting, I definitely commend to you checking out the YouTube video, which has already been posted. She lays waste to a lot of the myths out there in the world about HTTPS, whether they're performance-related, configuration-related. Fundamentally, the truth will be out, and Emily explains most, if not all, of the things that have really been occupying a lot of the people that we hear from and what prevents them from switching to HTTPS. So if you want to hear more about HTTPS myth-busting, check out Emily's video. Another thing that we're very happy to talk about is that our ads delivery is now effectively at 100%. A year ago, here at I/O, we were aiming for 50% by last June. We got there, but more importantly, as of today, with the exception of some parts of the world that block or otherwise degrade HTTPS traffic, we are delivering 100% of our ads via HTTPS. And this is a really big deal for publishers. This is a 1.5-year project that came to its final culmination. And what made it hard is because mixed content manifests in a lot of different ways. With ad auctions, we may very well wind up displaying ads from any of a number of different ad companies. And so we needed to ramp up the fact that we wanted to pull ads via HTTPS. And this is why this took us over a year and a half. The ramp up now has gone to 100%. Again, except for users that are somehow in environments that block or degrade HTTPS. But this is also a really, really good time to give a shout out to Wired and to BuzzFeed, both of which have started writing about their transition to HTTPS. So if you are a publisher and you are struggling with what the transition means and what the mechanics are of this transition, go check out those articles. They're very edifying. We also have a long history of shining light on how we do stuff, and this past year was no different. In mid-March, we launched our latest transparency report, the HTTPS report. Excuse me. We first looked closely at ourselves and our own services because we wanted to find areas that we could actually optimize and things where we could do better on HTTPS. And then we cast our automated gaze out into the world to look at sites to see how they were doing HTTPS, if they were doing HTTPS, and whether or not the server configurations were as modern as they could be. There's a lot of additional detail in this transparency report. If this is of interest to you, you should definitely go and check it out. In late March, Gmail enabled the display of a very small number of red pixels. You see there. That small open red lock indicates whether Gmail received an email message from the outside world in unencrypted form, i.e. not over TLS. If we do receive the message via TLS, we display nothing because we believe that is what it should be. Again, the blank slide. What's really amazing about this indicator is the effect that it actually had out on email, on the internet at large. About 2 years ago, when we released the Safer Email Transparency Report, that was June of 2014, it took about a year to increase the outbound email, the email that we sent, by about 10%. Now remember, both sides need to participate in this. This isn't something that we can do unilaterally. In fact, Gmail has been able to send email over TLS since its introduction in 2004. So 10% over the course of a year, we were pretty happy with that until this lock came along. So before we introduced the lock, and this is a screenshot straight from the Safer Email Transparency Report, so this is public data, we were at about 58% of the inbound traffic, and within 45 days, we had jumped by 20%. So this is the power of transparency. It's really also worth mentioning that the Gmail team is hard at work within the IETF to define SMTP strict transport security. which is the male equivalent of HSTS, which is the web version that then demonstrates and defines a mechanism for requiring HTTPS, or in this case, just TLS for SMTP. Also worth shouting out to the Android security team. Those of you who were in Adrian Ludwig's talk yesterday already know this, but another form of transparency that we believe in is things like the annual year in review. There have now been 2 of those. The most recent one was published last April, and it talks about the security-related changes within the Android ecosystem. Again, I encourage you to have a look if this stuff interests you. Auto updates today are best practice. Chrome has been doing it since it was introduced as a beta in 2008, and here we are 8 years later, and broad swaths of the industry have followed suit. This shows the last year's worth of Chrome updates, and you will see very rapid, very sharp transitions between the major versions. We update about 80% of the user base within the first week. We trend to about 90% in the second week, and that's when the long tail really kicks in. And there's an important lesson here for all developers, which is that solid engineering practices and quality assurance really matter. Because users never would have accepted auto updates if we pushed out crashy updates. But stable means stable. And the Chrome stable channel is very much intended and designed to be that stable release for the vast majority of our users. And as a result, users have accepted auto update. The other importance, of course, is the security benefits. The reason auto updates matter for security is because this is how we get risk mitigation, bug fixes, and security updates onto users' devices really quickly, and ideally without the user having to worry about it. The quicker that we can get security updates running on these devices, the quicker we can get them protected. This has been the case for Chrome all along. This has been the case for Chrome OS all along. And over the past year, Android has been making big steps forward with their monthly security updates. There have been 10 so far, and we look forward to continuing this process. Dave Burke even explicitly mentioned during his keynote that we're working hard to make updates even more seamless in Android N. So this is very much a multi-platform concerted effort. Now, a more recent product of ours that also embraces auto updates for user security is OnHub. We launched our first OnHub router late last October. And so far, it's been doing very, very well. Users really like the fact that it's as plug-and-play as you can make a home router. What we haven't talked about until today is that it was architected and designed and developed with strong security in mind from the very beginning. So much like Chrome OS devices, OnHub auto updates. Users don't have to worry about a thing. And just like it's a good security feature for Chrome and Chrome OS, it's a great security feature for OnHub. Those of you who track vulnerabilities will have heard of the great glibc vulnerability earlier this year. It made the headlines. It allowed remote attackers to cause anything from a denial of service due to a crash to arbitrary code execution. It was not a fun type of vuln. The entire OnHub fleet that had been out there since late October was patched 3 days after public availability of that vuln and public disclosure. So this is the power of auto updates. Not one user had to worry about it. Not one user had to download anything. It just happened automatically. Now, OnHub also believes in defense in depth. So it has verified boot. Each OnHub device actually contains a trusted platform module, a security processor, that allows us to apply assurance to a variety of systems and approaches to what we do with OnHub. For Android users, that also allows the OnHub mobile app to verify that it's talking to an actual OnHub router, that the right software is at the other end. There's a lot of verification and validation in both directions. The OnHub security team also tracks the provenance of third-party hardware, software, and firmware very carefully. So if a vulnerability is found anywhere in that stack, we know who to talk to, we can get the response and mitigation underway quickly, and we now know, because we proved it with the glibc vuln, we can actually get fixes out very, very quickly. So it may seem counterintuitive, but cloud management of the OnHub device is also a feature, because your Google account protects access to your OnHub as well. So all the protections that we create for your Google accounts apply here. Anything that we do in the future to further protect your Google account will also benefit you here. Most other routers require that you log into a local web server on the device. These do not have the greatest history of security, especially if the updates don't happen very frequently, and they have been a common vector of attack for bad actors. So the cloud-based nature of managing OnHub actually gives us a bunch of security benefits that are not necessarily intuitive, but the more we thought about it, the more we realized that this actually is a significant security benefit. And we believe so strongly, and we are so confident in the security of OnHub that we're adding it to our vulnerability rewards program, effective immediately. So last year, we gave out a lot of money to a lot of people for a lot of bugs. We are already on track this year for it to be at least as rewarding as 2015 was. So last June, we added Android to the VRP, and we just added OnHub. In March, we actually kicked things up a notch on the Chrome front on two specific aspects. For Chrome OS, we have increased the top reward from $50,000 US to $100,000 for a persistent compromise of a Chromebook in guest mode. With great research comes great reward. We're also extending the reward program scope to include rewards for bypasses of Chrome's safe browsing download protection features. So if you find a way to get around the download protection, there's definitely a vulnerability reward in your future. There's a lot more detail that you can find on the VRP page. And I'll be posting a lot of these links to the Spaces space for the session after this talk, so you don't have to furiously write down any URLs. I'll post them all there. Another aspect of the vulnerability rewards program that may not be as clear and as obvious to others, but is very important to us, is our patch rewards program. We actually reward security patches to key open source projects, even if they have no association to Google whatsoever, because we think that's the right thing to do. We believe your Google account is your most valuable Google asset, since that's what gates access to all of your data and all of your services across Google. And our research shows that Google accounts are considered most valuable amongst accounts from various service providers out there on the black market, which is a detail that pleases us greatly. Now, Adrian said yesterday that with the introduction of fingerprint unlock, the use of the lock screen on Nexus devices went from 50% to 90%. So only half the people who had Nexus devices had any kind of lock screen. And with the introduction of fingerprint and its ease of use, that went up to 90%. So usability really, really matters. So this is why we started work 5 or so years ago on the technology behind Security Key. We worked together with our fellow members of the FIDO Alliance, which is an industry consortium dedicated to open standards for strong authentication. Now, the core technology within a security key like this is called U2F. It's short for Universal Second Factor. And it's this really great combination of more security with more usability. That circle in the middle there, that's a touch sensor. It's not biometric. As long as you are as conductive as a typical live human being, you can trigger it. And what it does is gate the actual authentication process. The reductionist view of a successful phish or a successful account credential compromise is that the attacker can reuse the credentials at a time of their choosing. By requiring the proof of presence, by requiring that touch, we break phishing. And effectively, you become largely unphishable with a device like this protecting your account. Now, since we introduced Security Key for Google accounts in October of 2014, this has been the trend line. So it's definitely going in the right direction. At this point, we've enabled it both for our consumer accounts as well as for our Google for Work accounts. And other companies have started adopting it as well, including Dropbox, including GitHub. Now, the security team works closely with Google's Trust and Safety team on a variety of projects as well. Trust and Safety's charter is, among other things, to protect our users by creating and enforcing policies around spam, fraud, abuse, and inappropriate content, which means that they're usually the ones on the front lines when dealing with fraud-related issues. Now, if you're an AdWords customer, it can be both very expensive and very stressful if you lose control over the account that controls your AdWords. And this, unfortunately, happens a bit more often than any of us would prefer. So the Trust and Safety team has been working with a cross-section of AdWords customers in North and South America and in Europe on an experiment. We gave some of these customers very small numbers of security keys to see whether or not we could move the needle on account compromise for AdWords specifically. We haven't actually been running this experiment for very long yet, but so far the data has been quite compelling. It does indeed lead to a noticeable decrease in customers losing control over their accounts, and thus it leads to a very real fraud loss reduction for everybody. Now, even though the experiment isn't over, it has been so fruitful that we are actually going to be expanding this to Asia as well to see if, by taking an increasingly global approach, we can learn even more stuff than we have so far. Which brings us to our cloud. Another important thing that we've done over the course of the last year is launch our cloud identity and access management for all Google Cloud Platform customers. So first of all, terminology check. Authentication is what we've been talking about in the context of security key, proving that you are the legitimate user of a given account. Authorization is that based on the authenticated account, gate access to resources as appropriate. And together, these are referred to as IAM, Identity and Access Management. So we heard loud and clear from our cloud customers that what they needed was very thoughtfully designed and implemented access control to their cloud resources. And as of today, there are 20 predefined roles that meet the vast majority of the needs of our cloud customers. And though we've heard some feedback about the desire to self-define roles, we're not quite there yet. But if you're a cloud customer and you want self-defined roles, look for those coming within the next year. So a lot of additional information, including some videos from our GCP Next conference, which happened 2 months ago in San Francisco, up on YouTube. So if you're interested in this and IAM on our cloud, go check those out. So one security system here at Google that's been around for almost a decade now, and it reaches far and wide, is called safe browsing, where we protect users and their devices. We do this across many platforms, across Windows, across Mac OS X, across Linux, and we protect users from an assortment of badness, whether it's malware or phishing or other kinds of social engineering. And if you ever see one of these red screens, please consider enabling this little checkbox, because it gives us a bunch of additional information about how you got there and what was the trail that led you to this particular potentially compromised site, but certainly a site that we know is bad. That telemetry that we get, we can use to help everybody who consumes Safe Browsing's data, which is a variety of platforms and a variety of browsers on those platforms. Now, a relatively new kind of badness that you may not have heard of is unwanted software, which we abbreviate like this. And we've taken to calling ooze because saying UWS a lot is very, very cumbersome. We've been working against ooze for well over a year. We're far from done yet, but we've made some really significant steps forward. And if you check out on our security blog, we have a fairly comprehensive post from last December detailing some of the things that we've done and some of the things that we're still planning on doing in the future. So if you want details about that, the blog's the way to go. Another facet of social engineering-related protection in safe browsing is our enforcement against deceptive download buttons. They've been against our policy from the get-go, but starting in February, we announced increased enforcement. And this was a very popular choice, judging by the response that we got on Twitter and elsewhere, because these deceptive download buttons lead users to ooze, and they lead users to other forms of badness. And so this is one way that we can help protect a lot of users on the internet at scale. One of the most protective things that we did over this past year is extend more safe browsing protection down to the mobile device. So all the existing protections that you have already on the platform, Safety Net, Verify apps, are absolutely crucial to protecting Android itself. What we've done now is add on top of that and provide more protection against social engineering and malware within Chrome on Android. And since we are prone to measuring things and counting stuff, we recently sat down and figured out that safe browsing in toto across all of its supported platforms today protects well over 2 billion devices, which means that odds are today, even if you don't know it, there's a high likelihood that safe browsing made your internet experience that much safer because of how pervasive we have managed to make it be. Now, while we were developing safe browsing for mobile, we realized very early on that for the vast majority of the world, cellular data costs money. So pushing protective data updates down to a mobile device is something that is potentially very costly to the user, and we needed to be extremely respectful of our users' data usage. And so we developed the guiding principle, which was maximum protection per bit. Every single bit that safe browsing sends down to the local device needs to matter. So since this is a developer conference, we wanted to give you an idea of how we approached this problem and what we did to actually hit this. So first off, I'll give away a punchline. We do know at this point that what we did works. Even though it's only been live for about half a year, it is very clear to us, based on the number of warning interstitials that we display to users, that this protection has been highly, highly effective. At times, we have shown 5 times the warnings for social engineering on mobile devices per million pages than we do on desktop. At times, we've shown over 2x the malware warnings. This is not an indicator of a lack of security on the mobile platform. What this is an indicator of the interest that the bad guys have in getting people on the mobile platform. And the fact that we're showing these warnings means that we already know about the badness, and we can help protect users even better. So how did we do this? How did we pursue maximum protection per bit? So on the server side, we focused on minimizing the amount of data. And we did this by reorganizing how we handled these bad links. We know, for example, that certain campaigns of badness out there in the world are geospecific. They're only relevant to certain parts of the world, so there's no point in showing a mobile device user halfway around the world any information and pushing any of that information down to the device if they're never going to see the campaign. We also have information about the platform relevance of a given link and its badness. And we also rank the protectiveness or the badness of a given link so that we know if a particular link is actually followed more frequently, people are more likely to be attacked that way. And so we can stack rank that up. So we have lots of ways of filtering the optimal data set for any given device based on what device it is, which country it's in, and what's going on in the world at the time. Now, the client has a very good idea of its bandwidth. So it can effectively communicate to us and tell us that it can only handle so many updates and get so much information based on its current network conditions. So this is where the stack ranking comes in. If that device can only accept, say, 10 bad links, let's give that device the 10 most protective bits of information that we can give it at that very moment. Now, what we did is we reorganized some of the data structures for the wire protocol that we actually send through. And then we sat down with Google's compression team and worked out whether or not there was a way to further reorganize the data structures to make them that much more compressible. And as a result of all the data minimization on the server side and the increased compressibility of the data that ultimately improves and then gets decompressed on the client side, we really think that we got as close as we can to truly delivering maximal protection per bit. So how do you, as developers, take advantage of this? All this technology is part of the latest safe browsing protocol, version 4, which we're launching right here, right now at I/O. You can find out a bunch more information on the blog post, which went live a couple of minutes ago, probably right around the time that this talk began. The most important parts are the developer documentation. They're here at this URL, which I'll post to Spaces later. All these details are available. But even better for you is we have a reference client implementation, which we wrote in Go, and we put it up at this link. We'd like to highlight 2 very specific things about Protocol version 4, since we're introducing it now, and this is going to be new to all of you. First of all, if you do have a version 3 client implementation, please start transitioning now. We are beginning the deprecation process, and there is no reason to stick with version 3. Version 4 is better in any possible metric that we can think of. So please start that process. But if you're on Android, odds are you're not going to have to do any work at all because we've done all the work for you. We didn't get it quite done in time for I/O, but we're working to deliver a really simple Android API that you can call to verify goodness or badness of a URL. You will not have to implement a full version 4 client and its wire protocol yourselves. It's really important for our users' battery life, for our users' cellular phone bills, for all of these details to only have a single up-to-date copy of the safe browsing data locally on a device. And we're going to do that for you and provide this as a system service. Once the API is ready to use, we'll put up a blog post and we'll let you know exactly how to use it. So one thing we've gotten feedback on in previous IOs is that you're interested in best practices for how to protect yourselves. First off, please stop reusing passwords across services. This is the #1 most helpful thing that you can do for your attackers. Knock it off, please. It's not helpful. Second of all, please look to secure your accounts as much as possible. Now, there are a variety of different devices that support the U2F. These come in a variety of different colors right now. This one's actually one of mine. You can see it's scuffed. It's fairly well used. This one, for example, is not quite available yet, but it supports U2F over 3 different connectivity mechanisms. There's a USB port, it supports NFC, and it also supports Bluetooth Low Energy. There are devices out there where we can't get access to the NFC interface. There are mobile devices where it's not easy to use USB, so we need to be able to run U2F over any of these protocols. And there's a variety of solutions from a variety of different vendors out there available in the world today. Back to my slides, please. Thank you. The next thing we'd like to encourage you to do is to use TLS wherever possible. This also includes software updates. There have been a number of TLS-related vulnerabilities out in the world, and I was personally quite dismayed to see some developers check for the availability of updates via HTTP. Often they'll get the link to the updated binary via HTTP, and then they'll download it over HTTP. And then we will have heard, oh, but the binary is signed. Everything will be fine. Except the problem is if you send the link down to the device over HTTP and you actually do have a man-in-the-middle attacker there, they're going to change that link to something that they control. So the user, your user, might never actually get the binary you intended for them. So just do the simple and straightforward thing. Put HTTPS everywhere. It's a lot better for you, it's a lot better for your users, and it's a lot better for your reputation as a developer. Now, a lot of what we've talked about is protection at scale, billions of devices. But since 2012, we've also been showing very, very focused warnings to a very, very small percentage of our user base. And if you should ever see a warning like this, please take heed. We'll give you a bunch of advice on that Learn More link. Please don't ignore it. None of the advice is rocket science, and it's not super secret stuff. It's basically turn on two-factor authentication, be reasonable with your security precautions. And we are astonished at how few people actually follow this advice, even when we warn them very, very clearly. If you get this warning, please don't ignore it. And if you ever get this warning, your security posture really should become a priority over your convenience. Now, one of the things that I haven't had nearly as much time as I wanted to talk about is all the research that we do. But one item of research from last July in particular is worthwhile in this context, where we asked both experts and non-experts alike about what the most protective thing is that they could think of. And this is how it worked out. This graphic is actually in the blog post, so you're all taking pictures. You don't have to take a picture. There's an actual image online. I will send you the URL in Spaces. Really, it's OK. But one of the most interesting things to me is that the expert advice, #1 thing to do, is install software updates, which brings us all the way back to all the auto-update stuff. It actually works. And there is great consensus across the industry, across platforms, across companies, that this is the most user-beneficial security thing that you can do. And that's why also safe and secure and verified software updates are super important. So this is where our security blog is. We've actually done 41 blog posts since last year's I/O with a whole variety of additional content. I haven't had the time to talk about a lot of stuff. I could have gone on for another couple of hours easily. Among the things that I didn't have time to go into in depth were ephemeral IDs for our Eddystone BLE beacon implementation. So if you're interested about privacy-preserving technologies, particularly in the context of BLE, check out ephemeral IDs. It's a very clever technology and is there exclusively and very focusedly to protect individual users' privacy. I didn't get a chance to talk about certificate transparency, which is a core technology for trust out there and is growing in importance with every day. I definitely didn't talk enough about all of our research, all the research that we do out there. I didn't talk enough about the things that we deprecated over this last year. So SSLv3 we got rid of, RC4 and SHA-1 also deprecated. I didn't get a chance to talk about using Google Brain for anti-spam in Gmail, which has turned out to be a very, very effective tool in combating that sort of thing. And we also didn't have a chance to dig deep into the importance of notifications. Because one thing that we found is if we discover a website that has been compromised and that has become bad for its users, we have determined that the quicker we can get a notification to the site operator, the quicker they can remediate and the quicker they can actually protect all of their visitors. And we did a bunch of research last summer and recently published a paper based on this research. So notifications about security really do matter and really do help users. There's a huge spectrum of security stuff, particularly in the realm of human factors and in communication, that make a material difference to the security of all of our users. It's not just about the crypto. It's not just about the auth. It's not just about the technology. So as I said, I'll put a whole bunch of links to videos and to blogs and to websites up on Spaces shortly after this talk. I just ran out of time. Thanks very much. So I'll be around for a little while, but thank you.